All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Soccer Performance Podcast. Today, we're sitting with Federico Pizzuto. He's a strength and conditioning coach who operates right now for Columbus Crew First Team. He's got an amazing story. His education, alongside with his professional experience, is second to none. And so we're very excited. Thank you, Federico, for taking the time to sit with us today. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Juan. Thank you, Mario. I'm Federico Pizzuto. I'm the Director of Performance at the Columbus Crew. It's been 5 years now that I've been here in the US with the Columbus Crew specifically. And I developed to this position now, starting as a fitness coach and hand stage rehab, working with the return to player guys. But I'm Italian. I lived 20 years of my life in Italy. Then I moved to study and to work to Portugal, to Porto, where I lived for 6 years before coming here to Columbus in Ohio, to the US, to enjoy and embrace this experience with the Columbus Crew.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know that you mentioned, so you're born in Italy, but your studies took place in Portugal. What did you study? What was your educational route?
So I did my bachelor degree in Italy, in Rome, in exercise physiology and sports science. And then I had the opportunity with a scholarship that in Europe is very common. It's called the Erasmus program, to move for 1 year to Portugal. After finished the bachelor, I decided to stay in Portugal to do my master degree there at the University of Porto, where I studied high performance training with specialization in track and field and soccer. So that was I did like as education. That was my educational background and what I studied, like all around exercise physiology and sports science.
Right.
And
Very
cool. A question I have for Federico. Yeah. So within your master's, then was there a segue into Porto with like internships or placements, or you kind of, were applied and were able to get in? Did it kind of work like that? The university has good partnerships, I imagine, with clubs, or?
Actually, not really, but I was at the right place at the right moment. So I consider myself lucky because I was in a period of my life where, after playing soccer for 20 years of my life in Italy, and always having worked with soccer, I decided when I was in Portugal to focus more on like track and field and more like a long distance runner. So for 2-3 years of my life, I completely went far from soccer, and I was working with Olympic level athletes. I worked with Portuguese athletes that were like medalists of the Olympic Games. And so my mind was already like made up, and I say, okay, I will never go back to soccer. And then what happened here is that Porto, the soccer club doesn't have like a real strong relationship with the University of Porto, but they decided to open the door for 1 week to 50 students from the master. And what we had to do in that week was just like watching trainings, and then come up with a mini presentation of 15 minutes presentation. And of the 50 students that had this opportunity, me together with another one, we were the only two that presented something that was related to the physical development, to the performance side. All the others were mainly like tactical and technical and just more like soccer related. Like all the other students wanted to be coaches, like soccer coaches. Right. I wanted more to present a point of view related to how the kids in the academy can develop it through the physical side and not just the technical side. And I was lucky because that was the Porto was looking at the time, more than having other coaches, having more like somebody that was looking at the physical development of the kids, because they were feeling that was a component that was missing. And so like of the 50 students, I was the only one that after that week that we spent there, they offered me to spend more time, do a quick internship. It was 1 month, but then I was still working with the track and field athletes. So we had to make a decision, and then they offered me a contract. And then so they're like, it was kind of, I don't know what to do. And I came back, okay, my main passion has always been soccer. So I go back to soccer.
That's cool. That's actually a really interesting story. And especially so with that track and field kind of background, do you take a particular interest then with speed training for soccer players, or how, how do you try to implement some of that background into soccer?
Yeah, like for me, that was one of the main things that I presented when I was when I made the presentation after the week that I was there, and it was like, okay, the kids that Porto has are very strong technically and tactically. They are the best with the ball because they come from a school, a philosophy of like work in the tactical periodization that is focused on like the work with the ball. But how can we make the players like more efficient, more economical when they are running? So like that was what I presented, like working on that movement mechanics to the movement literacy and the speed work since young age, in order to not just developing good soccer player, but also good athletes, because the soccer, this was like kind of 8 years ago. Soccer was already moving to a place where like the physical demands, the physical ability was going to be something very important for a soccer player to be able to be successful in the long run. So that was what I brought from the my track and field experience to the soccer side, and try to explain why it was important to start to develop these kind of things with the kids at a young age, obviously depending on which kind of age they were, like which stage they were like at the time.
Right. And so I think it's a good topic to segue into, because the game is getting so physical, right? The game is getting so athletic. And I think, I mean, we can all agree, Mario and I have worked in North American sport where the players are not necessarily on the ball a lot, but maybe on the opposite side, that they're maybe a little bit more physical, right? They have some physical qualities, right? So I want to kind of shift the conversation towards that now. How do you move from Porto to the role that you're in now? What was the journey like there?
So that's also an interesting things, because again, I feel like for the background that I had, I was very lucky to be at Porto at the time. And then I saw the opportunity here in the US. I always have the dream to have an experience in the US. And when I saw the opportunity here at the Columbus Crew, like I applied for it, and I wasn't even expecting for a call. And at the end, at the time when I was contacted by like Columbus Crew, Steve Tashian was the old director of performance, and the coach was Greg Berhalter. So I had the luck of bringing, like, they knew that the way how they were working here at Columbus Crew was like they had good athletes more than soccer players. They were like, they knew that the physical capacity, the physical ability that the players had at the time was very good. But how can we bridge the gap of like this physical side with the tactical and technical side and the soccer part? And that was, I learned with my experience in Porto, because I was challenged in Porto, like especially with the kids. Okay, you want to work this physical part, this physical component, the physiological components, but you need to do it through the ball. You need to do it through the tactics. You need to do it through the specificity of soccer. And so like in my 5 years, 6 years with Porto, I had to develop like a way to work the physiological side and the physical side through the tactical aspects and the soccer related aspects. And that was what at the time Columbus Crew was looking, and Greg Berhalter specifically, and Steve Tashin were looking for. Somebody that wasn't just a performance specialist and just a guy that was good like with the running plans and conditioning and strength, but somebody that could make the transfer of like the physiological components to the field. And they were lacking this, and they were looking into someone that was able to bridge this gap. And that's why I feel like I was lucky for the background that I had and for what the Columbus Crew at that time in 2018 they were looking for, and that was brought me here.
And so did they bring you in originally right away into the first team, or did you overlook the academy? What was the role like? I know now you're with the first team, but has that always been?
Yeah, and they brought me directly with the first team.
Nice.
They brought me directly with the first team because with academy, I started with the younger kids, and then I moved every year or sometimes every 6 months, higher and higher. And I was working directly at the last couple of years. I was working with the second team and with the U19, and I was coordinating the rest of the academy. The work that I started to do on my first years, I was able to have interns and other people to help me to develop that kind of work with the younger kids. So I was already moving towards the first team in Porto, but there things are like longer and it's more complicated. And with my mindset of having an experience in the US, I felt that will have been a good opportunity for me, like the Columbus Crew won, and they were looking someone for the first team. So I came directly with the first team. And also, when I was in Porto, like I was in charge of the return to play hand stage rehab part. And it helped me too, because they were looking here for somebody that, for the hand stage rehab part, like they didn't have somebody that could do soccer drills or technical drills. They had mainly like a conditioning coach that was make players run. And then after that, okay, he's ready to train with the group. But there is that area, that gray area of like, no, we still have to develop things physically, physiologically through the ball. So like that was another thing that brought me here with the first team.
Wow. Mary, anything that you want to ask or add to that?
Yeah. No, there's a few good things there. And so I kind of want to dive into that end stage rehab, but maybe we'll go there after. Federico spoke a lot about, kind of the model he developed in Porto. He brought it to Columbus Crew. I think it would be really cool to kind of talk about that. So, because on one hand, now you came in to a very, probably the pinnacle of technical and tactical, training with a club like that, and you integrated some physical, and then you go on the other side of the world and you say, oh, and they're like, no, we want to integrate some more of that physical, technical, tactical with the physical here, and you brought that with you there. So I would like to kind of dive into a little bit more details there. Maybe first, if you don't mind, kind of talking about, what did you start implementing at Porto in the beginning that you think they needed, and then maybe how has that evolved? Maybe if you have some examples, especially for if any players listening at home, kind of how you integrate that all, because some people may not be able to picture how that looks exactly.
Yeah, it's complex because Portugal and the US are different realities, and it's interesting to see, like when you go to Portugal, you have kids that are like very skilled with the ball tactically, and they know what to do. They dominate the ball in a way that a lot of players here in the US don't even know how to do it yet. And then at the same time, you see the limitation of the physical side. For example, the difficulties of play a ball in the space and sprint to catch the ball before another guy that is more physically talented. And I had kids, for example, my struggle at the beginning was kids that didn't know how to read a ball coming in the air. They were great rondo, they were great doing every drill with the ball on the pitch, But if a ball was going up high in the air, they were struggling to understand where the ball was going to fall and dominate the ball at a high ball, or like heading the ball. And that was a struggle at the beginning, because there is this kind of little, that's an example, like the coordination of understanding like where the ball is going and place your body in that specific space. So like, for example, with the little kids, I started just to introduce little things that were like just high hand coordination of grabbing a ball that is going in the air, or like just doing these little technical things that they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know how to do a somersault. I think this is the word, like just a little physical thing that they never did. While coming here, the background of every player here, it's like wide, athletically, physically. They went from basketball to football to hockey to lacrosse to soccer. So they have like different components, and so this kind of things, they already have them. Now what is missing is the technical side or the tactical side. So it was challenging for me in Porto, because I had to introduce this kind of physical components through the game with the use of the ball and respecting the principle of soccer. And so even the speed, always making like we had moments that we were working in mini groups, especially with the most talented player that we were having an extra attention for the guys, and we were working in mini groups with more analytical things. But whenever I was working the more analytical things, the speed development part of the speed development part, like now how can we apply with the on the ball on the field? Here instead, there was a different side, especially with the first team, where like players were running a lot when they had fitness to do, and reaching the speed, or reaching the total load, the total distance, reaching the high metabolic distance. It was done through runs. But how can we reach the same metrics, the same value, the same variable through a soccer drill, through a drill development with the ball, with technical components specific for a fullback, specific for a center back, specific for a striker? And that were like, I had to spend most of the time, because for my first challenge was, I came here, one of the first things that Steve Tashian told me was, okay, we develop the fitness through running. Now I want you to develop 350 drills for each specific impulse that we use. So extensive, intensive, speed, but with the ball. So 10 for this, 10 for this, 10 for this, 10 for fullbacks, 10 for center backs, 10 for strikers, 10 for center mids. Everything with the ball, everything with the tactical side, because when we go to the specific position, you need to implement the tactical side. And at the same time, so like we were helping through the fitness and through the physiological development players also to understand the tactical demands. So it's not just running to run, but it's running to run to do an overlap and do a cross with quality. So that was the kind of challenge. While in Porto, I didn't have to worry a lot about do the cross right or do this movement right, do the first touch right, because they already had it. It just was more like, okay, now is the timing to run. Now is the timing to go to take the place, to receive the ball in the space, in the air, instead of just receiving the ball always on your feet. These were the kind of main differences. And I don't know if I answered to your question, but like it's very challenging and very different.
No, I think
that was good. No, you did answer the question, and I thought that's very interesting. So, and I'm gonna keep asking more questions. So one, it sounds like, okay, with the Porto, okay, with the drills, you just kind of spent more working with the coaches, perhaps. Okay, how do we make these drills a little more physical? Perhaps longer runs, perhaps, bringing more intensity to the drills in terms of physical side. And then kind of with Columbus, it's like, okay, how do we just kind of everything, kind of piece it all together? And like you said, you were hitting these GPS metrics before, but with that method. So, and and I understand what you mean. Like that sounds actually very challenging, especially when you got to come up with a database of all these drills and to match your intensive, extensive days. I imagine that would have been challenging, and how you integrate that. So I imagine there would have been a lot of communication with the coaching staff in the planning of sessions every day and week. So I imagine that was a lot of work. And anything you want to touch on there? Or
Yeah, I mean, no, I just think, and that's kind of the environment that we have here. I mean, I run a private training facility where I see that in youth development, there isn't an integration of anything, right? I think it's lacking. And so, you know, it's nice. And this is what I guess the purpose of this podcast is, and why we do these things, is to give insight to players, and to give insight to parents on how to approach training when your son or daughter isn't in a professional academy, right? Because I think that, and maybe we can talk about that briefly, the academy players are very lucky nowadays in North America, because they do have these very high level professional systems that you find in Europe. And so if you're able to get into those systems, you're seeing the end products, and the US is producing a lot of players that go and make the move to Europe from the MLS. And so I think those players are very lucky, but the vast majority are not going to be having those type of resources. And at the end of the day, in North America, it's very expensive, right? To have that professional schedule, 7 days a week, professional training. So I think it's important for players to take it upon themselves and learn and educate themselves a little bit on how to train. I kind of want to ask you that regarding young players. What do you see, both at your experiences in Europe and in North America? What are professional teams looking for? What do the players that make the jump from the academy to the first team have in common that you find?
That's an interesting question, and it's some of one of the projects that we are working now, especially in Columbus, is trying to bring as many academy players we can to the first team. So this is a long-term project that we have, and we are investing a lot in this. And so we are trying to detect in all the areas what are the main indicators that can help us to see, okay, this guy has the chance to be successful on a high level. What I feel sometimes is that players here, the player that spend more time playing soccer, and so working on the technical side, on the tactical side, and playing soccer, are the ones that if they can develop also the physical component, are the ones that are able to have more success. What I believe is that sometimes it doesn't happen here a lot, or that I felt in the past was happening a lot. We had great athletes, but they were not technically skilled as others. And I feel like soccer now is going, especially here in the US, the more you play, the more you spend time playing soccer and developing the technical side, the more you will be successful in the future, without taking apart, and that's my job, so I can't say that it's not important, without taking on the side the physical component that is always important. But it's finding the balance between these kind of things, instead of focusing too much on one more than another, and try to combine these kind of things is important to be successful in the future. And it's tricky because sometimes success here, especially at a young age, it's measured in a different way. It's measured in like the opportunity to get into a college, especially here in the US, or get a scholarship. So different kids try different things to be able to get access to education, and so they have to focus. Like a lot of things are like a lot of college still select players based on their physical testing data, things that they are the best on test, and so they get the scholarship, and so they focus a lot on that. But I feel like finding the balance between all the aspects, physiological aspect, technical and tactical, are like the most important things. And playing soccer, develop the individual technical skills are like, it's very important.
Yeah, I agree. Mayor, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I think he brought good insight. And Juan, we spoke about this with other guests in previous episodes, just building up to this, how, I mean, specifically more in Canada, I know you're in America there, but it's probably similar. They just, I think it makes sense what you said. We lack integrating everything together because like over here, it's technical practice and tactical practice, and then fitness practice is separate. You do this on this day or something like that. Where, when you integrate it, and we spoke about, Richard last week, Juan, integration of everything together and increasing the intensity of the training session provides the physical stimulus, but also improves the quality of the training. And it makes sense that, in places like Porto, they have that, really well. So I guess, Federico, you're trying to you're like, okay, the training is high quality in Porto. Let's increase some intensity. And, they get the physical stimulus, and then, and then we're over here, it's like, okay, I think, we are struggling big time to integrate it all.
Yeah.
So speed of play, quality of play, and then getting the physical stimulus, it should be done every time they're on the ball. And perhaps just we're not doing enough with that regard, not able to integrate everything.
The integration for me is key, and then because it allows like to have different kind of experiences and improve like the tools, the tools that you have in your bag. So like the more you practice the kind of things in a more complex situation, in a more integrated situation, instead of just in an analytical way, the more you will be able to solve problems when you are on field playing games. The more tools you will have to figure out a solution to a difficult situation that you will have on field. Analytical work is very important, and developing the fitness and developing the technical side, it's crucial. You need to spend time on that, and we do it here. We do it with the academy. We do it with at the first team level. But then, like bringing everything together and increase the number of times that you face difficulties and you need to solve difficulties at a more complex level and with a high intensity, with a high speed, with a high cognitive demands. The more you do this at a young age, the more you will be able to have successful in the future.
Yeah, we talk about that with many guests, and it's exactly that. The training has to resemble the game, and the game is complicated. The game is fast. The game is difficult, right? And if the training is easy, slow, then it's impossible to believe that you're preparing players the right way. And I think that, again, it's nice to hear it from somebody like you who has vast experience with young players, with professional players. I want to ask you this: if you had to say, kind of create checkpoints, for example, because I think this is a very important conversation to have for young players, right? In terms of time, a lot of parents, I think, have this misconception, but I like to think that if you don't have a solid technical foundation by the ages of, I would say, 14, right? Anything beyond that, you're hindering your chances. So just from your perspective, if you could create some guidance or some guidelines as to what those, checkpoints are, I think that would create a lot of value for players.
That's a tricky question, because I never thought about honestly about this kind of checkpoints But I could agree with you, like if you reach 14 years old and your like technical skills are like very limited, it will be very difficult like to develop this kind of things later. When we go to a more physical level, like even like for me, the speed part, it's very important. If you waste the time like of working on speed at a young age, when you are like 17, 18, you are already like, it will be difficult. It doesn't mean that you cannot improve, but it will be difficult to have that kind of ability to be fast. Also, thinking about the cognitive, the tactical aspects of soccer, like that you can always improve, you can always develop that at a later age. But if you don't have the basic ideas of like what a position require and what are like the different kind of options that you have based on where you are on the field by like 15, 16 years old, like it becomes even more complex after to like develop this kind of things. So analytical work, individual work is always important, but you always need to put it in the context of what you're doing. So the tactical part for me comes of a kid, of a player, of a young player being on field playing as much as he can. So I don't want to like say numbers or put like checkpoints of things, because I don't feel like at the moment like I have clear answer to that, because there are cases and it's always individual. We have also cases of players that came here with extraordinary physical ability as 18 years old and no knowledge of soccer, and they were able to be successful in some way. Now it depends on the way also how we measure success. So like I make an example, Aidan Morris for us, it's now our center mid that came here from the academy, and he developed through the academy, and he had technical ability, extraordinary technical ability when he was 16, 17 years old. He was able to have to cover distances and be like physical, very efficient when he was already like 16 years old, 15 years old. Same thing with the tactical ability. 17, 18 years old, he was put in a first team environment where he was able to learn the different things that the game required on a tactical level. Is he perfect? Can he still improve? Of course. But if he didn't have that exposure at that age, it would have been like very difficult now for him to keep improving and be the player that he is now.
Mm-hmm. That's yeah, I was gonna say that was really interesting, and that kind of covered what I wanted to say before. I wanted to add a layer, like when one, I know you use a checkpoint, but basically if you want to now integrate everything and design a session where you do have that high cognitive load, high intensity and everything, you need a certain amount of technical ability to do that session, right? Otherwise, you know, Federico, I guess you can't really be that much creative with that athlete, or let's say those group of athletes. And now it's interesting, you talk about this player, he had a high technical level, and now when he was asked to train with the first team at a higher intensity, which would be at a higher cognitive load, he was able to develop and improve over time, which I'm sure it was hard in the beginning, but over time he got better. But, you know, a player lacking that foundation, you know, would struggle in that situation, right? And then in those drills where you are demanding that high cognitive, high intensity, you know, they're going to get lost. So I think that just adds, you know, a lot more clarity to on Federico's points earlier.
I think sorry, Federico, I didn't mean to cut you off, but just to add to Mario's point, I think that, and I find, and I see it from a firsthand, you know, perspective, that there are players who are tactically sound, even at a young age. They get the game, they understand, you know, strategy, they get the game. Physically, they may be strong and then they have limitations from their technique. And that's where I think it's a shame, right? Because you have these qualities that if you just improve your technical ability, you can manifest, and you can actually, display your ideas. But a lot of players, can't get their thoughts through their feet because they don't have that link, right? That technical ability to do so. And so I think it's important for players to understand that. And this is where I know it's a difficult thing to word, right? So maybe it's not checkpoints, but if you really don't tackle technical ability at an early enough age, you're creating a very, very difficult hill to climb for yourself as the game gets faster and more demanding. If the game is fast and it's demanding, then your technique can't keep up, then you're going to create an imbalance. And obviously the result is self-explanatory, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. And the more I think, the more I feel like this, even since I came here, when I first came here in 2018, I could have I've seen a lot of players surviving in MLS through their physical ability, but the more we are going forward, the more time is going now in 2023. I see less of those cases, and players that in 2018 were able to survive in MLS just through their physical ability and not good technical skills. Now, I see this kind of few cases like this, very few cases like this of players that just physically they can be able to survive in MLS, because even here in MLS, the level is growing with South American players coming in, and you can survive anymore just with one ability, with the physical side. You need to have all the three, on the physical, tactical, and technical. They need to be at a very good level. And it's interesting because it made me think even more of the project, on the kind of project that we are developing here, and try to find the balance. And I think it's a long road because it's not easy, but trying to find the balance of how to push the players, especially the young players, a higher level. So when we find a talent, when we define that a player is a talent, how can we bring them to a higher level, to a higher group, respecting his development, respecting his physical side, because we don't want to put this kid at a risk of getting injured, or at a risk of not be ready to perform with an older group. But on the same time, how can we bring this player that physically is ready to make the jump, but technically he doesn't keep up? If we put him in that context, he will not develop because he will not be ready to be successful. So actually you put him in a situation where he will be unsuccessful so many times that actually you are almost jeopardize his development, or even the tactical side. So we are trying to analyze we have this different experts in different areas here. We are lucky here at the Columbus Crew, where we can try to analyze from my side more the physical and the performance side of player development, and then others the technical side and the tactical side. And how can we all decide okay, this guy is ready to make the jump in this area, but still not ready on this. So wait a little bit. Let's work on these kind of things. Let's bring him to a level where he's able to make the jump, and give him put him in an environment where he is able to improve his capacity, his abilities.
Well said. Mayor, anything?
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I do have a couple questions. One just popped up in my head. Okay, let's talk a little bit about now that player who is physically good, like you said, but maybe he's kind of struggling on that technical side. How would you kind of approach that? Is that more so, are you doing a lot of kind of combining everything in some drills, which they would do, is that more work with you, or are they spending a lot more time with technical coaches on the side in addition to training? How would that kind of play out?
There are different ways that we can do this kind of things, but mainly like when we see players that lack of more technical skills, like we have a very like strong core here of like technical development coaches, like coaches that work mainly of their technical skills. And so we can decide if this is the plan for the guy. We can decide to dedicate more time for a specific, for 6 weeks or 2 months, whatever it is, to spend more time with the technical coach, working on technical skills, all related to what is it, the kind of game, the kind of style that we want to play. Also, other solution that I was seeing more in Porto here, we do it sometimes, but it depends. And in Porto, we were using both for the physical side and both for the technical side. Sometimes we were putting players in different positions, just to see if they were able in a different area of the field, if they were able to develop that kind of technical thing. For example, a guy that was slow, or like a guy that center mid that was like had difficulties of facing the opponent goal. So he was mainly receiving the ball with the back to the goal and playing back. We were probably sometimes moving him a little bit on the side where he has to receive the ball more facing the game, or center back where he's received the ball, he has to face the game. See how we can develop this ability of like not be scared of like turn, or not be scared of like receiving the ball facing the goal, and try to work this. It's a technical component because it's just a body shape component, but if you cannot receive the ball and turn quick as a center mid, you will struggle to be a center mid. So we can work analytically, we can work with specific group, we can work this with drills during training, or we can work also like try to put the player in a different context in order to develop these kind of things, this kind of attitude.
I like that. Very, very subtle, and you kind of a sneaky way to develop those qualities. And I feel like maybe Juan, you can kind of say like, I feel from what I saw in Canada, coaches are very afraid to experiment with things like that, or they don't see reasons to do that. They just think, oh, he's good at this position, we're not going to change it, we want to win. But that's a big flaw over here, where the development should be number one focus, right?
We had an example in Porto. In Porto now is with the second team in Sporting Lisbon. He was a center mid, one of the most talented players that we had, but he was kind of slow. We tried to put him for like a couple of months as a winger, in order for him, like if he has to go to a duel and sprint, besides doing just the analytical work of movement mechanics, speed development, and make him faster in the way that we can, strength. Okay, let's put in a place where when he has to sprint, he cannot hide himself, because this will benefit when you go back to a center mid. If he needs to do a recovery run back, or if he needs to sprint into the box, he will have that attitude also to move faster, instead of just hide himself in the technical drill, the long pass, and the great vision that he had.
No, that's very interesting. And a question I did have for you. So in Porto, when you were there and you had to integrate that speed stuff, did they fully want it every time to be integrated with the ball, or did you also dedicate some time where, okay, let's work on those speed mechanics, and some, maybe you allocated a little bit of time to direct linear speed work? Were you able to do so?
It was tricky because I had to fight for that. But after a little, I was able to have 2 extra sessions a week. And they were mainly for the high potential players. But if there was some case that was like way far from being good, like we were bringing also that kid, because we had limited resources. So our training facility was far. When we organized in this session, they needed a bus to go to grab these kids and bring into the field. So for the high potential players, we allocated more resources. And so I was able to add 2 specific sessions a week where we could have worked more analytically on this kind of things. And it wasn't just speed, it was sometimes other kind of things, but like I was able to have something in place that was not just through the ball, because there are certain specific things that you cannot work just through the ball or through soccer drills. You need to spend some times in an analytical way. Like, so that was what I was able to achieve there. And it was good, actually. It was good because we saw the benefits of that. Because that was a main question that we had there. Like in the comparison in Portugal, it was Porto, Sporting, and Benfica. And you can see the different way how they work, the 3 teams, especially if we take Porto and Sporting. The main example of Sporting is Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo. He was a beast physically because they were working on a younger age on the physical capacity. Porto never work on the physical capacity, so they always had good technical players, but physically struggling. So they were trying to bridge this gap and like this lack. Okay, when we play against, Porto is not famous to develop wingers because they are good with the ball, but nobody sprints him behind. Sporting, they were playing the ball long. Everybody was able to sprint as fast as they can. So that was the kind of challenge that I faced there. So I had to explain them, like, if you want to work these kind of things, it has to come through the game, but they need to be able to do it on the side. Because it doesn't matter playing a ball in the space. If you are not fast, you are not fast.
In last episode, we had Richard Bucciarelli, who he's a trainer, a performance coach here in Toronto, and he talked about that the isolation and then the integration of that training, right? You train the quality on its own, and then you find a way to integrate it into position specific or game specific, and not always, right, as much as we say, okay, play, but there are some things that you're not going to improve by just playing. So you have to train that by itself. And then the key again is how do we get that and bring it back into the game, right? So Mayor, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, but that way we keep the episode within a good time. Anything you wanted to chat or question about?
No, nothing more. I thought that was very interesting. I thought we got on spoke about a lot of topics, and I thought Federico, gave some good insights and examples on how that looks. So I think people will find a lot of value in this episode. So Federico, thank you very much. I thought that was great.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. And I really enjoy talk about these things. Sometimes it's my mind go too fast and explaining things. It's not the easiest thing for me, not the easier thing for me, but I really enjoy doing these things. So thank you.
No problem. Mario and I love to talk about this stuff. And so anybody that's willing to come on and have a conversation with us, we're willing to have. So hopefully there's a part 2 in the making soon.
Absolutely.
Okay, lads. Everybody that tuned in, thank you so much. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, boys.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Federico.
Thank you.